Okay, hello everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lou. I'm on the iOS team, and I spent a lot of time working on the internationalization of the iOS apps, and I'm going to give you a flavor of what that was like, and so you can see some of the things that programmers have to think about when they want to internationalize a code base. So I'm going to start from, sorry. The first program that programmers use to learn a new language is called Hello World, which is ironic that we try to make it in every language, but the program itself is in English usually and not internationalizable. So I'm going to show you that program and how to internationalize it as an example. So this is Hello World in Swift. See, it's very simple. I'm just printing Hello World to the screen. And if I needed that to work in different languages, French, German, whatever, I would have to write some code to check what language I would want to be in and then print the appropriate string. So the way you do that simply in iOS is we apply the fundamental theorem of software engineering, which is that we can solve any problem by introducing some indirection. In this case, it's going to be a function. So I'm going to call a function, in this case, I'll just call it localized, which instead of taking the exact string I want to print, will take a key string that represents that string. So message underscore hello underscore world is just something that I say means hello world. And then I prepare a translation file. And in iOS, that's called localizable.strings. And in that file, I just set up that key to be the string in my base language, and in our case, it's English. And I also give a context comment so that a translator who sees just this information, this string, hello world, knows why I'm using that string. So in the real world app, we try to describe where in Trello you might see a string, like what screen it's on and what it's being used for. Then we take localizable.strings, which would have all the strings of our program. And in Trello, we upload that to, this is what Transifex looks like. This is our front end to our translation services. So the programmers, or whoever wants to get something translated, uploads it into here. There would normally be every language we're translating. I'm using our sample project, which only has a few. And then on the translator side, they would see all the strings that they need to translate. And you see the top red box has the actual string to translate. And then below that is the comment that I gave to give the context. And there's all kinds of features inside of Transifex. They can ask questions. It has translation memory. So if anyone has ever translated Hello World into French before in Trello in another, like in the web app or somewhere else, they get hints on what it might be already. They put in a translation. Then I get back localizable.strings for every language that we support. So we get 20 of these. And if I put that into our Xcode project, then we're pretty much done. Now that program will automatically detect the iPhone's localization setting and show the correct strings in all the right places. And that is a lot of what you have to do, but there's tons of caveats. And so a lot of the interesting parts of internationalization is all the kind of edge cases where just simply translating strings is not all you need to do in order to get it to be correct. So I'm going to go through a bunch of those now to give you some idea of what they are, and then there's even some more things, and I'll talk about that too. So the first thing that you run into, or one of the things that you run into, is that sometimes some text you have to show on the screen needs to have some piece of data substituted into part of the string. So I'll show you an example. So we might have some string talking about labels, and we might call it by its color. And this would be the simple version, but in real life, in real Trello or in real programs, the blue is not hard-coded into the string. It's something that we would find out based on what the what they're actually doing. So that would be a color substitution. We'd want to put in a piece of data in the middle of the string. So this is the normal way that you would do that in iOS. We make a placeholder for the part that is filled in later, and then we'll provide the actual color at runtime. And so this would, if I did nothing, so at this case, if I did nothing, this would be the string the translator would get, and they would see this, and I would have to explain that the %@ is meant to be a placeholder for a color, and then they would have to just make sure that there was exactly 1% in the string that they gave me where the color would normally be. But it can get a little more complicated than that, because we don't have this. I'll show a real example in Trello, but I'll just make a simplified example here where I might not even know that label is what I want to call it. Maybe I have multiple things, all with colors, and I really want two things to be substituted. So now I have two places. One is a color and one is a thing. And again, the translator would have to provide a string with those two things in there. But in a lot of languages, maybe even more languages than do it the English way, you actually reverse the color and thing. I know that I think in French and Spanish they do that, and I'm not really. In general, adjectives and nouns can be in different orders, so it's not sufficient just to provide a string where you just have two substitutions without saying which one is actually the adjective and which one is actually the noun. So again, in iOS, they solved that by adding a number to each substitution piece. So you see the $1 and the $2, and then I have to explain. So basically, what's getting down to is I have to explain in my developer comment that the %1@ will be replaced by a color, and the $2@ is going to be replaced by a thing, and that they should construct a string using that correctly. And this if we had done this way, I'm sure that many times we would not get strings that were constructed exactly correctly, because this is kind of crazy and not reasonable for non-programmers to. In fact, I had to look this up before I wrote the slide, because I can't remember where the $sign goes, and it's kind of not very user-friendly for translation. So for that reason, and also for the reason that we wanted all of our string substitution to look like the other versions of Trello's string substitution. So for example, we wanted our string substitution to look like the web's string substitution to translators. So we just adopted the web's standard for substitution. So it ends up looking like this, which is a lot nicer, where, and this is the Chrome Internationalisation standard. I don't know what it's called, but it's something that comes from Google and is used by the web team, but it's also used by the server team. And for us, that means all notifications and actions come this way already. So we used it for all of our strings just to keep everything simple. And also, it's a lot more user-friendly to translators to see a string like this. And it's a lot more obvious to them if they've gotten something wrong. And the strings end up looking a little more readable. So this is what they get. In Trello, I did a search to try to find, does any language ever take advantage of the fact that variables can sometimes be out of order? And I did find one in my quick search, which, if you're interested, is this one. It's normally says something like 1 of 7 checklist items completed would be the English version, but you can see in Simplified Chinese, however they need to say that, they need to say the items first before the number completed. So they need it to be in reverse order, so that it does get taken advantage of. So we don't have the simple example of adjectives now, but in the Simplified Chinese, you would, for whatever reason, you say the items before you say the total number before you say completed. So that's an example of that. And you can tell that if I, instead of having num checklist items and num completed, if I had whatever $1 at, that would make the string pretty unreadable. So the next thing that we run into is plurals. And I recently wrote a blog on the on our tech blog that explain this. I'm going to try to go. A lot of this covers that exact same ground. But so if you've read that, you'll know this part. But this is a line of code that is in the canonical book on C, the Kernahan and Ritchie book on C, on how to print out. You have n items, correctly putting an S after item if the number of items is not 1 and if it is 1. And this line works great in English. It works in a lot of languages. It works in all the languages that we supported in our first version of internationalization. So it works in French and German and Spanish and Portuguese. But plurals in other languages can be quite complex. In fact, to get the equivalent line in Russian to do this would be this. So they don't base, they base the word ending with, there are 6 buckets of possible, we just have 1 or not 1. They have whether the number is divisible by 10 or 100 or not 110. It's very complicated. So, and Welsh is another example where they also have 6. A lot of Eastern European languages have many. And as an example of something that's different, Chinese, I believe Japanese don't change the text based on number. That's not one of the ways in which they can change text. So the way that works, and you can read about it more in the blog, there's a standard put out by Unicode that defines 6, you can have a maximum of 6 buckets. I guess they've decided that, or it's true that every language can be done this way, hopefully. And what we end up doing is those buckets they're just named: the 0 bucket, the 1 bucket, 2, few, many, and other. And you provide a string for all of those cases. So in English, we can provide, say for 0, say no members; for 1, say 1 member; 2, 2 members, and then otherwise use the count. In reality, in English, it's only going to ever use 1 when it's 1, and then the count for other, I think. And then for other languages, they provide the ones that the Unicode specification says that they should provide. And then we pass in the count. If you look at the top line, we pass in the count, the actual count that we want, and we say that to look up a plural based on the keyword count, and then we have a library a third-party library that we use that picks the right thing from the strings file based on that. So the actual code is very simple from our side, but the third-party library actually has to implement for every language on Earth all the various rules in the Unicode. Basically they have to implement this, but for every language. And that's how that works. And another kind of complex problem is formatting. So this is this doesn't show up that much in the Trello iOS, but there are a few places where we need to be able to show a string, and then in the middle of the string, there would be like something bold or italicized or something, or a link, something where it's not just straight text. Now, I'm not talking about obviously descriptions or comments. That's all user text and is not part of this. I'm talking about text that's actually embedded in the app. So one example is on the iOS accounts screen when you have sync enabled. If you look at the sync enable setting, underneath there's a warning where it says like warning in bold, and then the rest of the warning is not in bold. So the question is like, how should we embed that formatting? Now, before we were internationalized, one popular way would be to build up a string by appending them all together, like get the warning in bold, get the regular string in non-bold, and just append them together. And sometimes we even built up complex strings that have some words plus some bold words plus some regular words plus a link plus, but that we call that sentence construction. And that kind of thing is impossible to internationalize, because we, just like with the substitutions where we could have word order differences, certainly any kind of complicated sentence would not be just built up by just adding those. If I individually translated each of those pieces, I could not then get them into, get the Russian version of all those pieces and add them up in the same way. That would never work. So we have just a general rule of never constructing user strings that are in the app for users by appending strings together, because it would be impossible to translate. So we always need to prepare strings with their formatting codes in them. So the most obvious thing to do, and we considered it, is just using HTML. We could put bold, B tags and I tags and whatever we need in into the string, and Transifex can allow them to do that. But we actually don't have complex formatting needs, and there's a question of whether doing that, allowing HTML in and doing some kind of HTML rendering, opens up a security loophole into Trello that can be attacked by translators. And at the time we were doing this, we were having a Slack conversation about this, and there was this whole thing about how there was like a discussion of how Daniel was going to try to attack our app with through the Transifex layer. And so I just decided that we would not have any HTML at all, because I didn't want to have to think about like any kind of security surface area. So we just very simply have the ability to have extremely simple tagging that we wrote ourselves and tested ourselves, and feel that it's a lot safer. It doesn't obviously allow any kind of JavaScript embedding. It doesn't even allow attributes of any kind, and it's not even HTML. So this is what it normally looks like. You just define tags that you want. So in this case, we're making a W tag and a WP tag, and we're just simply looking for those strings inside of that string, and then replacing it with a bold or regular fonts or whatever we need. And it's a lot. We have a linter, which is like a code that checks to make sure the strings are created correctly, that makes sure that no malformed tags can get through the system. So the tags have to be there. They have to be opened and closed correctly. They have to match English. So if I have those tags in English, they have to be there in whatever language you want. And so this is, we feel like this is a lot safer. It doesn't open us up to security problems by trying to embed HTML. It also doesn't we don't allow like even tag nesting tags or attributes or anything. So this is not HTML, but it's just using some of the syntax of HTML to make it familiar feeling. And so that's what we did to solve formatting. And then I kind of have like other stuff. These are things that are somewhat built into iOS. So I already talked about sentence construction. There's actually one example in all of our code base, so the Trello iOS code base, where we technically do a little bit of this sentence construction. So, and we've run into problems with it, but it's hard to change because it's being done by a third-party app. So in Trello, for anywhere where we might show a date, you can also see something like just now, or 5 minutes ago, or an hour ago, or you might see the date and time. So like that, you see that kind of thing on comments or in actions. So that text is, for us, constructed by, there's this thing called a relative date formatter that can give you that. But the way they decided to do that is they decided that the word for ago and the word for what's the opposite of ago? I can't remember what there's two suffixes that they append them on. So we've had some problems with languages and had to change the way they show dates to just do it more simply without relative or just a simpler format until we get a chance to change that. But other than that, we've changed all sentence construction. Another hard problem is dates, but it's not hard for iOS because Apple has dealt with dates. So normally when you want to internationalize dates, you might have the problem of, in Europe, they use, day and month, and in the US, we use month day, and it's even possible for people to say they would prefer something else. So we just have to say whether we want a short, medium, long representation, and it'll do the right thing. If we really do care about what parts are in there, we want the month part in, but not the year part in, we can say to iOS, we want a date with month and day, and just do it the correct way for the way they have their internationalization, their localization set up, and it'll do it for us. It's not too much of a problem. In iOS and some other systems, it might be more complicated. And then the big thing that we have not done yet, we don't support in Trello, we don't support any of the right to left languages yet, but we have started doing the work that it would take to support them, because iOS has added all kinds of support for that. So one thing about right to left languages is that the strings get drawn on the screen from the right side to the left side. That's the obvious thing it does. But it also, if you're doing it correctly, the entire user interface should really be flipped. So whereas most iOS applications have the concept of a back button in the upper left, and the concept of swiping to go forward to be a right to left swipe, and the swiping to go backwards to be a left to right swipe, when you are correctly implementing a right to left language, you're also supposed to flip that concept. So back buttons would be on the right side. Tables, if they have chevrons, so those little greater than signs, would be less than signs, and they would be on the left side. Swiping gestures would be reversed. And there's a lot of things that you have to do to make it feel natural to someone whose native language is a right to left language. So for new things that we do it using the new APIs, which automatically do some of that for us. But I don't believe that we've done that all over the app. And I'm sure there are many, many places where we haven't done it correctly because we haven't tested it. But that's a to be done problem in internationalization of iOS. And I was trying to keep this short because Alexia was going to be talking after, so I'm pretty much done. So, but if anyone has any questions.
It looks like we do.
Oh, okay, I have to go to, sorry, I need to stop the screen sharing or somehow get Zoom to show up for me. Where are the questions? Are they in Coffee Talk and Slack, or are they in Zoom, or?
They're in the Slack room. So if you want to read the questions aloud as you answer them.
Sure.
Cool. I'm gonna mute myself again.
So, okay. So let's see. How do you deal with strings with forming like loop? Okay, great. So I was going to answer Daniel's first one, and I'm sure he's asking because he's going to try to break us. But anyway, they were designed specifically with you in mind, Daniel. So hopefully they don't have problems. Have we found the developer comment we provide? I'm reading Barry's. Have we found the developer comment we provide along with the strings enough context for translators? How effective has that been? Well, that's a really good question. It's timely because we just added stickers into the iOS app. And stickers, one of the things that we have supported, along with internationalization, kind of coincident with it because it's really the right time to do it, was accessibility. So everything in iOS should be accessible, meaning, if you go into accessibility mode and you ask for iOS to speak to you and to be able to use the accessibility gestures, that should all work fine. So we have to provide strings that describe the stickers so that you can use the stickers without being able to see them, and we have to get those internationalized. And this, I knew for a fact, was going to be a crazy, like it says things like, Taco is angry, or like, Taco is sleeping. And so I wrote very detailed developer comments saying like, there's a sticker, it's an iMessage, the Taco is the name of our mascot, don't translate that, and describing what you see in the sticker, and in some cases why you might have wanted to use that sticker. And it's being translated right now, and there was one question that came in that said, I don't understand what taco wearing a headband means. Can you give me more information? But by the time I actually went to Transifex, the translator had deleted the comment, meaning that they had solved it for themselves. I get on order of 1 question from a translator a month. So I think it's working pretty well. And so, but often it is that our fault that we didn't put in a good enough comment. And we've got trying to get better. I think we had some kind of idiomatic thing recently where we were going to say something like, we're doing housekeeping, and this is something that's coming so there's a description of what that word means in this context so that you can translate it correctly. And Trello sometimes has like in jokes or things that are some idiomatic. So we've gone through a little bit of trouble to explain what that means. So for instance, replicating splines is one of those ones that comes up. And okay, so web and Android. No, well, all of the implementations are written in Swift, so they can't really use any of the implementations. We don't even share strings except for, so I'm reading the question, does web and Android share these implementations? We don't share strings. iOS does not share any strings with anything except for notifications and actions. Those are actually generated by the server. The server sends us the key to look up, and we have embedded in the app their string files. But they are the ones that create those string files and get them done through Transifex. Everyone uses Transifex. So Transifex is used by all of the applications, but also by many other things in Trello. So like the meta pages and other things. Like our app store descriptions go through Transifex, release notes, everything like that. So so I'm pretty sure everyone uses Transifex for translating whatever they need to get translated, but we don't share any implementations. And I don't know a lot about how the other ones do it. I know that many frameworks have some kinds of thing built in. A lot of what I described there is somewhat built into iOS, and then we've added on top where we didn't agree with how iOS does it to make it a little, mostly almost every time when we don't agree with iOS, it's for the benefit of the translators. So like, we think that if we do this work, translation will be easier. That's what, most of the time, why we've made those decisions. Any other questions? Or am I missing any? I don't think so. Oh, how do we deal with variable lengths of translation? That's a good, I forgot to put that. That was, so iOS has that problem maybe more acutely and Android would have this too, because we have a constrained screen. So some of our strings, and this happened early on with German. So many things which are 1 4-letter word in English might be, a very long word in German, which is not a problem usually for a translator, except that we're trying to put it on a button that takes up half the size of an iPhone screen. And so in the beginning, we had all kinds of places where we hadn't programmed the iOS app to understand that strings could be a lot longer than they are in English and do proper word wrapping or whatever you need to do, like maybe truncating in some cases, but I think we try not to do that anywhere. But in a lot of cases, we just have to ask for a smaller translation. So now we put that, much more likely put that in developer comments, that if we think the thing is going to be in a constrained size, so being shown on just 1/3 of an iPhone screen in the top right over a table or something, we'll say that, at most you can use 20 characters. I think another example might be the Today widget labels. Like those had to be fussed with a lot to get them to be short enough in every language. Another issue that we ran into, this was kind of like a back and forth with me and Joanna over the course of several versions, is dealing with accents. So, and when someone is searching. So all of the labels of all of the languages are translated. So the colors, blue, yellow, red. And in languages that have accented letters, almost all of those labels have accented letters in them, but we prefer that you be able to type it in with or without accented letters. And that code in iOS was just extremely hard to get correct. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But the last straw was when it was being applied to languages that don't even have, Latin letters, like our letter set with accents, like so Russian and Chinese, and we were still applying the accent code, so it was really destroying the Chinese names of labels. And then that's when I completely ripped it out and started all over, because I knew that we just weren't doing it right at all. And so I bit the bullet instead of just keep fixing it. Does anyone QA the translated app? Do they ever find problems in translations? We absolutely do find problems in translations. And if Joanna's here, she can maybe talk about what she does. But I know she does and look at it, because we get reports of problems in languages. So, and we also get them from people who use them in the beta and so forth. But any other questions?
That is all the questions.